Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third Food Summit event, Programs, Support, and Funding Opportunities for the Beginning or Established Producer. Thank you for attending. We will begin momentarily, but first enjoy this video of URI's agronomy farm.
Farm is on the URI campus. URI was founded as a college of agriculture. The agricultural experiment station actually predates the university itself by 4 years, and we've always had farms on campus.
We're here at the University of Rhode Island's Gardner Crops Research Center, which is informally known as the Agronomy Farm. And it's where we conduct research on vegetable crops, for instance, grain crops. And it's also a great teaching resource for the University of Rhode Island. So we hold labs here and classes. So it gives students hands-on experience. You know, I just love to grow plants, I love to grow food, and I just really enjoy imparting some of my knowledge to them and seeing them grow and develop through our Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems program.
I work with students in two different ways. So I have my classes where we're working in a large group, but then I also use a lot of student labor in my projects. So I have a lot of students who work for me, and we're working much more one-on-one, and we really get to know each other. A lot of the students I've had over the years are now the farmers that I work with.
My name is Farid Geshem. I'm originally from Iran, and I'm working on saffron here and also on vegetables. This year is the fourth year that we work on saffron, and every year we had the acceptable or good yield, and even more than twice as Iran. In Rhode Island, all the farms are so small, and saffron is a best option because farmers no need to have the machines, and it's great for this area, I think.
Here at the agronomy farm, of course, I'm always harvesting food from my plots. And so our food is donated to a variety of organizations and groups. So some of it goes to the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Some of it goes to the Johnny Cake and Food Pantry, for instance, in Wakefield. Also our own graduate village, because we do have food insecurity issues here on campus. And so, of course, it's the University of Rhode Island, and we want to take care of our own.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Catherine Flynn, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Rhode Island Business Engagement Center. And today's event is entitled Programs, Support, and Funding Opportunities for the Beginning or Established Producer. We hope you enjoyed that video, and we look forward to hearing how the USDA Farm Service Agency and the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management can help your farm operations. Today's event is the third installment in a series that builds on the discussions that took place at the 2021 Rhode Island Food System Summit back in January. We hope this event will help continue the conversation and help the community as we move toward greater food security for all Rhode Islanders. As I mentioned, at today's event, we have partnered with the USDA Farm Service Agency and the Rhode Island DEM, who has organized this event for you today. Today's speakers will walk individuals through the process of working with these agencies, including how to develop a solid farm business plan, which is integral requirement of their loan programs, and how to work with staff or allied agencies. To kick off this event, I would like to introduce Michael Sullivan. He will kick the event off for us today. He's a professor emeritus at the URI Department of Plant Sciences and Entomology. He has served both in the Rhode Island DEM and at the USDA Farm Service Agency. He will join by his colleagues today from both agencies. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be with you today and with the people online. With me, as you indicated, I have Ken Ayers, the Chief of Agriculture at Rhode Island DEM, and Matt Richter, who is the district director from Farm Services Agency. Matt, like many in the agency, carries multiple titles. He's also what I lovingly call the chief loan officer, so he has multiple duties. As you noted in your kind introduction, I'm a professor of emeritus, and I spent 40 plus years at the agronomy farm, and it's good to see these young colleagues continuing some of our efforts. Rhode Island's green industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The food industry component of that is several hundred million if you look at it along the scale. So today, again, we'll have Matt and Ken with us, and they'll speak in sequence with me, and we'll go from there. So Matt, if we'll start the slides, we'll roll along through here. We had a little fun with the tongue-in-cheek on this, saying, yes, we're really from the government and here to help you. What we're going to try and do is let you understand what the various agencies are and various programs and how you can access them and how you can benefit from them. Next. One of the things that I have to say is we're truly committed to science-based work. We are also not only concerned with the production of food, but we're concerned about how it's supplied, how it's distributed, and the security of folks who are less fortunate than certainly myself. We work directly with producers, processors, and then we have a broad set of partnerships that we think are integral to the success. Next, Matt. One of the things that people will note, particularly when working with USDA, is a lot of the paperwork is focused on, let's call it classic US agriculture, where their program might fit directly the upper left slide, which is, a 640-acre cornfield. When we have a hoop house or a cold frame with 7 different crops in it, we have our uniquenesses in equipment. Down the bottom, you have a standard wheat country tractor, and we have what's called an Alice G, which is circa 1952, but for Rhode Island farm is a very scalable and appropriate piece of equipment. Then we have common things like good structures to soil water erosion. We handle manure a little differently here in that it becomes an absolute, shall we say, asset for management of our soil conditions. Next, Matt. So what we quickly wanted to do, or what I quickly wanted to do, is talk about farm planning and how we set things in place, and how, whether you're coming to USDA or going to DEM, there are certain things you're going to need. And I consider this to be kind of the 5-legged stool of setting a good plan in place. Next, Matt. Starting with, what are the markets that you're looking at? I've spent about 15 months in China in the last decade, in China, Vietnam, others, where most any family there has somebody who carries the label farmer. And their role in that family unit is the family or personal food production. Here we think about farmers as providing something extramural to the family, where it's farm stands, markets, or even wholesale. And so when you come to us, having some clear definition of your market, what are you going to produce? Where do you hope to sell it? How do you help to sell it will be integral. Next one, Matt. One of the things we're truly blessed with here in Rhode Island is some phenomenal soils. If you look in and around the University of Rhode Island, we have a lot of what's called Bridgehampton Enfield soils. These are soils that we can grow anything and grow it in great quantity. But within a mile of campus, you also have farms with something like a Canton, Charlton type soil. Well, a good corn farmer on a Bridgehampton soil can expect to produce 30 to 32 tons of silage per acre per year. But on a Canton, Charlton, that same really good farmer can only produce 15 to 18 tons. So knowing those base resources and what are they capable of? Or are you going to grow things in a greenhouse of some kind of specialty system? We're going to want to know, do you own the space? Do you own the land? Do you have a lease? If you have a lease, how many years is it? If you come with a business plan that says it's just this year, you're going to have to look at how do you invest in that land or that production system a little differently. Next. And so we have simple label of capital. Is that cash or credit? Or is it a well-heeled benefactor? Do you have liquid assets, or are they all tied up? Do you own equipment? Do you need to rent, borrow? What are your human capital? What are your personal skills as management? Do you know what you don't know? Are you aware of your deficiencies? Are you willing to learn? An important criteria is that honest self-evaluation of cash flow, equipment, and your own capacities. Next, Matt. And then talent. Do you have, if you've got energy and enthusiasm, that's great, but do you have education or do you have direct experience? It's important in evaluating somebody's financial capacity of, do you have a probability of success? Next, Matt. And then last, one of the challenges we have in Rhode Island are what I would call a technical support system. So if you're beginning to be involved here, make sure you know who are the like people. Get into some of the young farmer networks or the sod producers or the vegetable growers, the greenhouse growers. Find that network of conversation. But also look to the commercial seed houses. What are they recommending for varieties? If you're going to use pesticide, the dealers and representatives are critical to helping you understand the cost benefits of many of those, and the same with fertilizers and other things. And so these are really the things that are going to go into a solid food production, a farm production plan. And next one, Matt. And if you start with, and you'll see this one again with Matt in a little while, and the first criteria he's going to say is, what's your business plan? And he'll have to assess it to economic viability, sustainability, and others. So next person coming in the next slide is, I still think of him as a young man because I first met him as an 18-year-old kid. And now all of a sudden he's a little gray-haired, very experienced, in the dean of the Division of Agriculture, the chief of the Division of Agriculture, Mr. Kenneth Ayers.
Thanks, Mike, and appreciate the kind words. Mike and I go back both in my days as a grad student and when he was with DM as director and now in many other roles. So appreciate that. So just to fill in a little bit to follow on to Mike, I'm there's a state and federal part to agriculture in Rhode Island. Mike's with URI, formerly with the USDA. Matt is with USDA. So I'm with the state division of agriculture. I represent the state programs. To fill in for those who are not familiar with the kind of the lay of the land in Rhode Island, I am a division chief of agriculture and forestry in the Department of Environmental Management, the agency that covers all the environmental programs in Rhode Island. There's not a separate Department of Agriculture in Rhode Island. I have found in 30 plus years of working in this realm that that's an advantage, because when you think about the goal that we have of kind of a one-stop shopping for agriculture within the state, the fact that my colleagues are all in an agency that I can walk down the hall, talk to, work through issues on behalf of farmers is a clear advantage. I don't have to go to various departments often enough. It's not a siloed system. It's a very synchronized system in terms of that. And so that's a clear advantage. So I represent agriculture and forestry in that department. And we have a director, Janet Coy, who's very supportive as well. Agriculture in Rhode Island, there's a little bit over 1,000 farms, probably split about half and half between food and non-food. And we're a nimble and an adaptable department and division. We make it a point to work very closely with our colleagues in other agencies, whether that be USDA or pretty close-knit ecosystem that includes organizations like Farm Fresh Rhode Island, Hope in Maine, Southside Community Land Trust. That's a clear advantage, I think, to the way that Rhode Island does its business. We're adaptable enough that we can respond pretty quickly to dynamics, and one of the biggest ones that's in the past year has been COVID, which has influenced the way we all go about doing our business and has made us think going forward about what is a sustainable food system, one that clearly does not rely upon, or should not, the traditional food system that brings food across the country and often across the world to feed Rhode Island, and where we don't grow enough of our own food to have a resilient local food system. We need to rely less and less upon that long chain that brings food to us, and more upon our capacity to produce food regionally and in Rhode Island. And so we can adapt to those conditions and move our programs forward, working closely with people. And I think that's one advantage as well about being able to be in a small state that's nimble and adaptable. So that's our overall philosophy of trying to be responsive, and many things that we do are in direct response to the dynamics that occur. In Rhode Island, when we talk about food, we talk about the retail component being critically important, urban agriculture being important, indoor agriculture being increasingly important. A lot of our food is being grown under cover in controlled atmosphere situations, and more that will be the case. Our relationship to the water is really important. We have a really strong aquaculture component. Aquaculture is agriculture. Small farms. And that's not just to discount in any way the importance of our horticulture industry, which is critical, but this is a food system follow on. That's why we're focused on that. So go to the next slide. So we run, actually back up just a little bit. We run a lot of programs. Some of them are regulatory, some of them are not regulatory. But DEM tries to take the role of really being a one-stop shopper for farmers when it comes down to programs that the state is responsible for. You can go to my office, the Division of Agriculture, and spread out from there rather than have to hopefully fish for answers across various agencies. And I think uniquely, many of the regulatory programs that you might see in other agencies in other states, such as wetlands permitting or getting a burn permit or pesticides or animal health, have been moved to DEM over the years. It may not necessarily change the outcome, but it does cut down on the bureaucracy, and it does have people involved who are clearly trying to walk what is sometimes a pretty fine line between making sure that we maintain the standards and actually move things through the program, through the system quickly. I think we're very adept at that and good at it, but it does clearly provide an advantage to how things are being done in Rhode Island. These are just examples of some of the roles that we play. I won't get into the weeds of those various programs, but they're vast. I've got a small crew, but they cover a lot of ground, just as is true in every agency. in Rhode Island. So if you go to the next slide, please. Again, just some examples of some of the things that we do. Another example of moving things to DM, which, for example, might have been in a Department of Health someplace, is food safety, which is a role that we just took on recently with the Food Safety Modernization Act. So we conduct food safety programs, pesticide programs. Another thing that we do, we administer. There's some very important laws in the state, such as right to farm or farmland preservation programs, which provide kind of the backbone and the infrastructure for protecting farmers' rights in the state, protecting land in the state. And Mike said there's beautiful farmland in Rhode Island all across it. We have a very high land value. Our land values are very high in Rhode Island, typically the highest in the country. That puts pressures on farmers in terms of paying taxes. We've got programs to knock that down, address it, protecting land, designating land as farming so that the taxes are low, etc. So our overall goal is to work closely with partners, including USDA, to provide a culture that allows agriculture to go and grow, with the goal of increasing food security being more and more important, especially lessons learned, not that they weren't learned before, but even becoming amplified, due to what we've all experienced and are continuing to experience with food security resulting from COVID. Next slide. And I think we take the approach of being adaptable and innovative as possible. Our partnerships are really, really important, whether we're partnering with young farmers to find land, with seafood, with urban agriculture, etc. But we rely upon them. They're important. We are unique in having our own food plan in Rhode Island. Very few states do that. That food plan is shown at the center of the state slide, called Relish Rhode. We also are unique in having a director of food strategy, one who was we had the position was created about 3-4 years ago, and then just filled again after being vacant for a period of time with a woman named Julie Stelmazik, who was just hired 2 weeks ago. So we have a director of food strategy who helps to strategically coordinate efforts in terms of fulfilling the goals in that Relish Rhode food plan. That's unique about us as well. And as mentioned before, we have a really strong seafood component here. Work closely with our aquaculture farmers, and not just aquaculture farmers, but the commercial fish industry in general. You cannot think of a holistic food plan without including seafood, and we work closely with the industry to make sure that that's captured. Next slide. The LASA grant program, which is one that's highlighted on this slide, Local Agriculture and Seafood Act, is a really important part of our efforts to move agriculture forward and to support small farmers and beginning farmers, often who are not necessarily credit worthy, just because of their inexperience, or might be too entrepreneurial, an idea that might not attract typical funding streams. So that's an important grant program, which we typically run every year. It's been a couple years since the last one. We're just about to issue another RFP in about 2 weeks, but it's highlighted on the stage and has done a lot to help farmers develop good ideas, build them, grow them. And there are other people in the state who can take the ball from there after they get a LASA grant, like Hope in Maine, to help it further develop, or Farm First Rhode Island, or you can test it out at a farmer's market, etc. The goal really is a ladder to help farmers grow their businesses. Next. And another innovative idea that we run in Rhode Island, probably that you won't see elsewhere, is a farmland access program. This is a twist on typical farmland protection. Shows an ongoing project where we have an RFP out responses due in about 30 days, where we take one of the things that we do in addition to typical farmland protection is with farmland access, we are actually buying properties, owning them for a period of time, the state is, DEM, and then selling them at a appraised value to a farmer, typically newer beginning, so that we can control that final price, that not let the market drive up the price, which often happens when you have good farmland for sale. So the piece of property that you see highlighted there, we bought. We have an RFP out for this 10 acres of good farmland, and we're requesting applications. We'll review those applications, make a decision or a recommendation to the director as to who should buy it through a committee process. But the advantage of doing so is that the market's not going to take control of the final price of this. We're not worried about making money. That's not our job. Our job is to make land affordable. And when it's sold, it'll be protected, it back in private hands, just like any farmland protection project, but it'll be in the hands of a newer beginning farmer who can then take that property and grow their business. Just an example of the thought that we put into programs with the idea of trying to make them as nimble as possible to support the agriculture community of the state. Next slide.
Thank you, Ken. One of the things I did want to remind folks of is that you can jump in and ask questions by commenting at the YouTube video and into the chat box, and we'll all see that. And we've endeavored to leave enough time at the end of the presentation for a question and answer period. Where as a recovering academic, we've probably compressed 2 semesters of coursework into 70 minutes here, so feel free to ask your questions. Next presenter is Matt Richter, District Director, Chief Farm Loan Officer, and currently the Acting Executive Director as well. So Matthew, your part of the presentation, please.
Thank you, Michael. So we have a whole bundle of different programs with Farm Service Agency that farmers should be taking advantage of. Both Farm Service Agency and NRCS are here to help farmers. We aim to conserve the land and keep its production value high. We help manage risk by offering insurance, conservation plans, and safety net programs. In the event of a disaster, we bring out assistance programs and conservation programs to help you get back on your feet. Finally, we help fund farms through loans, grants, and cost shares. Now, as Michael said earlier, one of the most important things for every farm to consider is a strong business plan. Without a strong plan, other decisions, such as what to sell products at, cannot be easily made. A plan should be made considering all the expenses at the farm, with budgets on how much to spend on fertilizer, labor hired, etc. In this way, farmers have a budget to follow and know at what price point of sales the farm will break even, and then can make decisions accordingly. Without a plan, it is very easy to overspend on chemicals and price products too low, leading to a negative cash flow. Farming is a business. It doesn't matter how great your yields are if your farm has a consistently negative cash flow. While we are willing to help you build a plan, no one knows your operation like you. We won't go through a shoebox of receipts and build a plan for you. It's up to you to keep a quality record-keeping system. And it's very important to keep that system to make sure your farm is viable both this year and into the future. FSA has targeted funding for beginning farmers and traditionally underserved farmers that comes from a different pot of money than our other loans. In order to qualify as a beginning farmer, you must have less than 10 years of farming experience with a substantial responsibility, such as making purchasing and planting decisions. For our loans, we have a maximum of $600,000 for a farm ownership loan to purchase property or build on property, and $400,000 for an operating loan, which can be used for annual operating expenses or equipment purchases. We also have a micro loan that caps out at $50,000 for both ownership and operating. Every loan application requires a business plan projection, so that's where the business plan comes in important again. ARC PLC is a safety net program and ranchers when there's a substantial drop in revenue in the case of ARC or prices with PLC for covered commodities. This program has slowly been growing in Rhode Island every year, but it's still underutilized throughout the state, and we'd like to make sure you don't leave this safety net money on the table. ELAP provides emergency assistance to eligible farmers of livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish. It covers losses due to an eligible adverse weather or loss condition, including blizzards, disease, water shortage, and others. Rhode Island has made multiple ELAP payments to honey producers in the past few years, for instance. So it's another thing to help get you back on your feet. TAP, or the Tree Assistance Program, provides financial assistance to orchardists and nursery tree growers to replace or rehabilitate eligible trees, bushes, and vines lost to natural disasters. We know it takes many years to bring production levels to full with any trees, bushes, or vines planted. TAP can help reduce the substantial expense to replant the orchard, and our goal is to reduce the replanting costs to keep the operation afloat until production is fully realized. NAP, or the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, is an insurance program for crops that are not covered by traditional crop insurance, such as peppers, strawberries, etc. NAP provides basic coverage equivalent to the catastrophic level risk protection plan of regular crop insurance, and it also offers higher levels of buy-up coverage. There are also discounts on the fees included on NAP available to beginning farmers. Farm storage facility loans provide low-interest financing for producers to store, handle, and/or transport eligible commodities they produce. This is also an underutilized resource here in Rhode Island. These loans can be used to cover walk-in coolers, refrigerated vehicles, refrigerated equipment specific to the oyster community, buildings, storage, others. I mean, there's a lot of different varieties of uses for the farm storage facility loan program, but it's often not utilized here, and I'm not entirely sure why. Now, importantly, who is eligible? For most of our programs, payments made directly or indirectly to a person cannot exceed annual specified amounts depending on the program. For a lot of the safety net programs, it's around $125,000 a year. Crop acreage reporting documents, or crop acreage reports documents on all crops and their intended uses. It's an important part of record keeping for producers and is required for most FSA program eligibility. So you want to make sure you come in and by the crop reporting deadline and make sure all your crops are reported to Rhode Island so that you're eligible for all these. Without that, you may not be eligible for some of the safety net programs. Producers must also be compliant with wetland and HEL provisions to participate in an FSA program. Now we'll talk a little bit about farm loan programs. So we have a large variety of loan programs available to help fund the capital needs of the farm.
Matt, I'm going to jump in quickly, interrupt you, because one of the things that I don't think people always understand, particularly beginning farmers, that, and certainly you can help. Some of the loans, I believe the operational loan would allow a successful applicant to be able to put part of that loan to, shall we say, keeping the household intact, drawing some food, salary, home maintenance things. And so helping folks understand which loans they can come to and get that kind of integrated support, I think is important.
It is true. We can use them for family living expenses. So you don't have to forego a salary just to keep your farm afloat. Each year, Congress targets a percentage of farm ownership and farm operating loan funds to beginning, minority, and women farmers and ranchers. USDA has these funds committed to those groups that may have been discriminated against by USDA in the past. The good thing about having these as separate funds is it comes from a different pot of money. So while we may run out of our regular pot of money, there may still be money for beginning farmers and ranchers for loans. An emphasis is also placed on making loans to military veterans involved in production agriculture ventures. FSA also makes operating loans of up to $5,000 to eligible individual youths ages 10 to 20 to finance income-producing agricultural-related projects. The loans can go for up to 7 years. The project must be modest in size, and it developed and carried out by youth participating in 4-H clubs, FFA, tribal youth organizations. We have one that has it through an agricultural affiliated school. A mentor from an agricultural group is required, and the signature of a parent or legal guardian to approve the venture. These loans can cover show cattle, hogs, and other livestock, a small nursery, a cut flower enterprise. I mean, there's many agricultural businesses and educational ventures that we can fund through this program. I've had one person who bought cattle and built up the herd. Every year she would sell a couple calves to make her loan payment, but would keep a couple as replacements as well, and managed to get her herd to about 30 cows, which she then sold for her freshman year of college to help out with tuition. Microloans provide access to credit and an alternative for smaller farming operations, like specialty crop producers and operators of CSAs, which we have a lot of here in Rhode Island. These smaller farms, including non-traditional farm operations, often face limited financing options due to the fact that they're just smaller in size, and banks like to have larger operations that have possibly more income coming out, so we can come in and fill that gap. And from there, I'll turn it over to Michael to talk about some conservation programs.
Wearing multiple hats today. These particular programs are USDA programs, but administered largely through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. But virtually all of them have, as we've described before, some kind of collaborative effort. Also, a predicate condition for any producer or interested party in being involved in these is back to that: what's the farm plan? What's the ranch plan? What's the business plan? To determine whether you can gain access to the program, but also to what degree of support. And again, Rhode Island does things a little differently. Next slide, Matt. One of I think the most noteworthy projects that have occurred in recent years in Rhode Island led the nation in this activity, in that through NRCS and in cooperation with Farm Services Agency, but at least two separate divisions of DEM, both the ag component, because as Ken's indicated, aquaculture is agriculture, but also with the Marine Resources Group at DEM, the Water Quality Group at DEM. We started a pilot project a number of years ago where oyster producers working in collaboration with NRCS would create kind of micro reefs, try to reestablish some of the critical habitat, bottom habitat for oysters through using old shells, whether oyster shells, clam shells from the harvesting houses, but to create little micro plots where the mature oysters, those oysters capable of reproducing, would be placed at a density with the hope that these micro reefs would begin to create wild populations again and reestablish oysters in Narragansett Bay or in the coastal salt ponds. Rhode Island in the turn of the 20th century was one of the leading areas for high quality oyster production. A lot of the old infrastructure you see in Providence along the along the waterfront are the remnants of old oyster shucking houses. And so this is a beginning effort. This year we committed to, I believe the final number was 24 different producers participating, and about $3 million of commitment over the next few years to establish or to try and reestablish some of this activity. And so we have a competent farmer, an environmental agency, DEM, working together to recreate habitat. And I can tell you one of the real fun things in recent years has been seeing some of these established in urban areas where kids understand or begin to understand where food can come from. Next slide, please. One of the important things that NRCS does, and again in collaboration with DEM and the university through its extension services, the whole idea of how do you take care of that base production? Again, back to that 5-pod thing I showed. What's the resource that you have? And if you're not a good steward of the soil, you're not going to maintain much farm productivity over the years. You know, most of us in our history schooling will understand, as humanity became stopped hunting and gathering and began to grow things, initially they'd grow on an area, slash and burn, and exploit the nutrients in the soil and then move on. Well, we're no longer able to move on. And we're not making a whole lot more soil. And so taking good care of the resources that we have and keeping it productive. As I said earlier, a Bridgehampton soil can produce 30 plus tons of silage. It can produce 40,000 pounds of potatoes. But if you're not taking care of that soil, those production levels will decline. So things like cover cropping, keeping soil in place, keeping the nutrients that you apply in place, optimizing soil organic matter. A good Bridgehampton soil will be 5 to 5.5% organic matter. And so if you have a chance to acquire or use a Bridgehampton, but you see through a soil test that it's 3.5 or 4, you know that soil's been asked to do more than maybe it could. And so figuring out how to restore organic matter to contribute to an environmentally and ecologically healthy soil and bring that optimum level back are part of this soil health programming. You know, as a soil geek, if you wish, I look at this little clod and I can tell not just by the earthworm's presence, but by the way that soil's cracking and the color of the roots showing that this is a very healthy soil. So learning to assess, NRCS does a fair bit of training, has a bunch of videos, has other things. But again, in normal times, we'd be out onto the fields with farmers trying to help you understand. To go back quickly to one of Ken's comments about, again, a program he's proud of, and I am as well, this beginning farmer land acquisition. I've been asked as the, well, still professor emeritus or retired, probably been on that property a half a dozen times with people who reached out and said, what can you tell me? What I'm looking at this or that. Are there other things maybe I could look at? And so anyone who has an interest, I'm more than willing to meet anyone out there. I'm not offering any insider information, but helping you understand the asset. And that's a potentially phenomenal little farm that you can farm it as just that 10 acres, or you can bid it with a house on it and create a wonderful homestead. So an innovative program combined with the soil health and other things, it's a wonderful opportunity. Next one, please. We have a grand total of, I think it's 17 acres in Rhode Island in the Conservation Reserve Program. This is one on a national basis where the goal is to try and take environmentally sensitive areas like river bottom frontage, wetland buffer areas, and get them out of active production and provide a water quality or soil preservation benefit. In Rhode Island, I think there's a lot of room for people who have larger land holdings where the land is transitioning back to forest as it will, but working with growers who might begin to actively farm some of that land. You might also include a component of it in NRCS's Conservation Reserve Program. We used to have in Rhode Island a lot more habitat for neotropical migratory songbirds, for ruffed grouse, for woodcock, and a number of upland game bird species. And those populations are dramatically decreased because this kind of habitat has disappeared. And so participating in a conservation reserve program where the incentive for the landowner is a payment as high as $90 or $100 per acre per year, but the public policy, public benefit is you can manage these to create habitat for these critical species. Next slide, please. And right now, Rhode Island is in a bordering on a crisis, I fear. One of the programs critical to that crisis is EFRP, or the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. We have had a 40-year history of damage in this state by gypsy moth. We've begun to see emerald ash borer and a number of other invasive pests. And there are about 40,000 acres of oak, red oak, white oak forest in Rhode Island that have been under assault for about 5 years from gypsy moth. And then the insult added to the injury of the gypsy moths was the drought of 2020. And so again, this is a program where critical partnering is important. You have the individual forest owner, the forest steward, Ken, as chief of agriculture and forestry services, has a core group of excellent quality foresters, young men and women who can help people assess the condition of the forest, can help assess how badly it's damaged, and what, frankly, right now, my concern is the fire risk. So you have, and I've met with some growers who, for 50 years or more were looking with that producer's affection to their crop at ever-expanding red, black, white oak that were maintained to be creating furniture-grade veneers and lumber. But now, as gypsy moth defoliated, reduced vigor, caused damage, these trees began to shed branches. The quality of veneer grade log became a saw grade log, maybe becoming firewood log. And so the value of that timber is declining. FSA is the conduit for the money. NRCS helps with the appraisal. DEM helps with forest stewardship plans. And so this is a program that, again, I think is applicable and critical for as much as 40,000 acres. Ken, you could jump in here. If I remember correctly from Fern on your staff, there are only 7,000 or 8,000 of those acres that have plans in place and have begun some kind of assessment, and 30,000 or so acres that are unplanned at this point.
Yeah, so Fern Graves, to whom Mike's talking to, is one of the foresters on our staff, of which we have many who work with foresters individually to help out with stewardship plans, and meaning that they'll provide the technical assistance and then often work with private foresters to carry out some of those activities. But there's clear advantages to this. One of them being that when you have a stewardship plan and you're enrolled in a program in Rhode Island, which we call Farm, Forest, and Open Space, which requires a stewardship program, you get a lower tax break on the property as well. The tax assessor is obligated to look at the property as forest land, not as highest best use, which is typically developed land. So one of the advantages of the stewardship plan, this applies to farmers as well, is your ability to enroll in this program and be taxed at what we call current use value, which is as a farm or as a forest, rather than so many house lots, so many condos, so much industrial development. But it also gives you a direct link to the technical resources that exist in the state. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we try and serve as a portal to those resources, not just the resources that the state through DEM runs, but whether they be through USDA Farm Services Agency, whether they be through USDA NRCS, whether they be through URI. So there's a clear advantage to doing so and working through DM and others. And a good contact person in that regard is Fern Graves or TJ Boudreau, the Deputy Chief of Forestry.
Thank you, Ken. One of the really neat things about being in agriculture in Rhode Island, the Northeast to a great extent, but Rhode Island particularly, is if a producer has a problem, they make a call or two. It's the classic case of the Rhode Island. You may know a guy or a gal, and Ken and I and our staffs, when I had a staff, but certainly Ken, Matt, Puvan Comedy from NRCS, you can put a team together where people have responsibility for different components, and you can get into a field situation. Even in today's COVID world, 6 feet apart, masked, and into a field so you have a commonplace conversation about what's the problem, and you divide and conquer. Maybe we need some emergency funds from Matt to help with cash flow for the farm. Maybe you need a permit from Ag Division. An example may be, and I'll leave it unnamed, but last fall, a Situate orchard called. They had a water problem, and the pond had gone dry, and there were some other challenges. So DEM Ag Division, Farm Services, NRCS, we even had a guest from Senator Reed's office along with us. So it was a a clear field definition of what are the problems and who's going to take responsibility for working with the producer to try and fix the beginning of a solution and create a path for that person. And tremendously satisfying in Rhode Island to have, again, as Ken expressed, and I tried to, and I think Matt, as a relative, knew, we have the ability to put critical people together with a producer. Not just a problem solving, but also the opportunity to create innovative products or other things. At the North, well, it used to be Snake Den, not the Snake Den Farm, or at the farm in Cranston. Ken, whether you want to say a few words about the incubator capacity there for somebody who maybe has a good idea. And then Matt, jump in with how a youth loan or a micro loan can help somebody that maybe doesn't have land but has an idea for a unique product.
Thanks, Mike. So what Mike's talking about is, we have exceedingly high land values, and as a way of trying to help out farmers that may not have grown up in a traditional farm family where land is passed down from generation to generation, but have a struggle to buy land. The state has taken the land that we own, DM, and we're talking about here, and made certain parts of it available for incubator agriculture. Specifically, we have repurposed land that we own, leased it out to organizations, third parties like Northern Rhode Island Conservation District or Southside Community Land Trust, and asked them, as a condition of that agreement, to make land available in small plots, often a half acre, 2, 3 acres, to beginning farmers where they can grow a business, develop it, and move on. They're not required to move on. They can stay, but the whole idea is to incubate their farms and then build up their capacity to buy their own property. In one of those examples, the Snake Den Farm, which is part of the Snake Den Park, which is now being repurposed for those, has been repurposed for those purposes. Another example is what we call Urban Edge Farm, where we, again, DM went out and bought another farm. And in this case, instead of reselling it, we've kept it, and we lease that property out, and then we're talking about for $1 per year to Southside Community Land Trust, and ask them to develop urban agriculture programs. They've done a remarkable job in doing so. It was a rough, old, barely used farm when they bought it. They developed into a critical or beautiful venue with lots of help from Champlain Foundation and other sources of funding. And there's now, I don't know exactly, 10, 12 farmers that are incubating their businesses out there who use the infrastructure out there, given the barns have been rebuilt and greenhouses have been constructed and water lines have been put in and alternative energy systems have been put in, and they're building their businesses. A lot of these farmers are ethnic or immigrant. They have grown up in agricultural settings in their home country, but come to Rhode Island to have a place to grow. Maybe they don't live where farmland's nearby or can't afford to buy it. But those are the type of examples, again, getting back to being innovative and adapting what we do for the uniqueness of Rhode Island, working closely with sister agencies, NRCS and FSA to do so. But just another example of what we're talking about and what Mike was talking about in this regard.
Thank you, Ken. You have an image here with my contact email, Matthew's contact, Ken. Two critical colleagues to agriculture in Rhode Island are Heather Fobet and Andy Rhode. Heather is one of the premier national, an exceptionally skilled and qualified individual that can help anyone with proper pest identification, offer you alternative controls from cultural, mechanical, chemical, and a resource based at URI. Andy Rhode is a a farmer at heart and a kind of a systems person who is developing a lot of the university's capacity for high tunnel or controlled environment growth systems, and would be a resource as well. And those two will work with folks like Rebecca Brown or John Taylor, who were part of the intro video, to provide current growers, new growers, or interested party with additional insight. Next slide, please. And the last image we put in here was just a whole bunch of resources. We knew people watching and others would be able to capture these. And so we're at a point where what we would hope as we put this together was creating a conversation now for the balance of our time, so that folks who have been with us for the whole time or for part of it can ask questions of myself, Ken, or Matt. And so I turn it over to the staff behind the cameras to begin to feed those questions. Ken, you want to handle that first?
Yeah, I'm not trying to get the gist of the question. I guess if the question is contacts, best is Ananda Fraser of my staff, who handles the two grant programs that I mentioned, being the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program and the Local Agriculture and Seafood Act Program. So Ananda Fraser, and you can go to the DM website to get the specific phone numbers or email contacts there. But I would go through Ananda, who would be the best portal for those two grant programs.
Yeah, a little quick follow-up on that. Something like the SARA program, Sustainable Ag Research Education, is currently soliciting grants which have producer grants, but also may have partnership grants. And so there's an option A, option B, and anyone, certainly the questioner, if you had a commodity specific question, shoot an email to Ken, myself, and we might be able to direct you to a faculty member with an interest in that area.
I
So I
think,
can take this one.
yeah, the USDA is best to answer this one.
Yeah, we came out with additional programs. C-Trap was one that was for the fishermen that typically didn't get assistance. We opened that up and we put out millions upon millions of dollars to that. We also opened up the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, which helped out a lot of other farms across the nation. So we did recognize that it was a difficult year for a lot of people, and we did have disaster programs directly related to help open up funding capabilities. And, you know, we recognized that a lot of markets were shut down. A lot of food waste actually went up because there was just nowhere to market those products. So we opened up food buying through the USDA. We'd purchase agricultural products and then send them out to food banks and other places like that that are in need. So we did do a lot of different things to try and recognize that, you know, because of COVID and everything else, we jumped on and tried to assist not only the farmers, but also marketers and everyone involved in agriculture during that time.
Correct. There was an array of programs. There still is chance for some producers to be helped by the drought declaration if you had problems. And so again, that's shoot us an email and we'll direct you as best we can to the initial help. Next question.
And let me just also say that that's still continuing. What Congress is still appropriating money to respond. And some of the federal grant programs, and let's take value-added producer grants as one example, have more money in them right now than you'll probably ever see. And also some of the typical requirements are reduced. For example, the value-added producer grant program, which I think is out for RFP, has been changed from a 50% cost share to a 10% cost share. And the amount of money in the pool has been doubled, if not tripled. So if you're ever going to apply for a federal program through USDA, don't just think about last year, but think about now as well. Some of this money takes a little bit of while to flow through the system. Money is being continually appropriated by Congress to USDA, especially crop block grant program, value-added producer grant program, all the ones that USDA run. Keep a close eye on them, and I think this is a year to put those applications in.
I agree, Ken. I'd add in that one of the things, perhaps you could post the link to your every other Monday phone call where a group, whether it's Ag Division, USDA, Farm Fresh Rhode Island, all the partners are involved in a phone conversation about how they can help or how they can participate in the programs.
Yeah, right. And I think the organizers hopefully have everybody's email address. And so what I'll do is I'll just pop them all into my meeting invite every other Tuesday at 1 o'clock. I hold this call that Mike talks about, who's participated all last year and this year, as well as with many other people. The Division of Ag, and I'm sure many other people do so, sends out a weekly newsletter every Friday. We try and help get information out in that regard. Farm Bureau has a great website in which we post information. So we all try and make sure the information is flowing.
Yeah, it's been a devastating year in many ways. And part of the press you've heard is farm community's been hit rather hard with bogus claims from unemployment, bogus claims for farm loans through SBA and others. And so get involved in that call or get into the networks that we have. Next question, please.
The best thing to do, and I see
those
that
calls, that's one. Send an email to Ken Ayers and his staff. I think Ananda runs that, correct?
she does. And the folks, again, behind the cameras here, Katie McGann and others from URI, will take the information that we're talking about that we want you to have, and we'll send an email out to everybody's on this call with this information on it.
I think we have one question that says, are there programs that can help pay employees and small CSA farms, community-supported agriculture farms? If it's a new operation, I don't believe that there are, but if you have a history and a plan, then I think there is some capacity both through SBA, but possibly through FSA. Matt, do you have a thought there?
What we could do is we could do a micro loan. So basically, we just take out enough to cover, whatever your staff labor cost is for the year, and then we just have you pay it back at the end of the year. So if your cash flow is looking a little tight for a few months, we could come in, fill that gap, and then at the end of the year, once you've sold all your products, we just ask to be paid back. But that would be one way that you could supplement, at least in the meantime, if things are, depending on month to month, a little tight.
Yeah.
We could come in and fill that gap.
Other questions, please. Were there any types of farms that did better this year with COVID-19?
Farmers.
Yeah, I'd start with there. In the end, COVID-19 benefited agriculture to a certain extent. A lot of people from the ornamental industry were staying home And so the demand for plants produced in Rhode Island, the demand for assistance with gardens, lawns, and others was increased. So the traffic helped there. It was a challenge initially in that under the first executive orders closing, the local garden centers were closed, but the big box stores still were open. And so that changed after some outreach education to decision makers. And I think most every aspect of agriculture in Rhode Island benefited in the end because it strengthened the demand for local materials. And that's a good thing in my view.
Yeah, I will add that an interesting phenomenon, which, silver lining to a challenging situation, is that there was so much interest in local food. Many people didn't want to shop in congregate shopping environments, didn't want to go to a supermarket, wanted direct access to their local farm, seafood, or to buy their vegetable starts at the greenhouse. And farmers pivoted to be able to make those sales transactions. Maybe it's a change in their website, change in how they package things. So in a sense, agriculture had a good year. Not everybody did. The wholesale markets are still depressed. I listened the other night to Farm Credit East, which is another organization, not government, but connected to government programs that people should be aware of. And, their portfolio, which covers a lot of Rhode Island and a lot of New England, is as strong as it's ever been in terms of loans. And that's testimony. And the reason I listen to these things to find out how the ag economy is going, that, there's a strong interest in local agriculture. Almost everything that's produced on a farm, there's interest in, just because of the desire to be supporting the local community, buying things, without having to have a long supply chain, buying things directly from the producer. That's just one of the phenomena that came out of the COVID situation and still is.
Next question. Is it required for farmers to have 3 years of a Schedule F for new farmers to receive funding for new farmers? I'd say no, and now Matthew, you can explain.
So I will say it depends. So for a lot of our loans, no.
First of all, a Schedule F is the IRS tax code for a farmer.
Yes. For a lot of our loans, that is not required. If you have a degree in agriculture, or you can show evidence that you've worked on a farm and been in a capacity that you were making decisions, that experience is enough for most of our operating loans, which is used for annual operating expenses or to buy machinery and equipment. So if you wanted to lease land and start a farm, that would be fine. For farm ownership, it changes. You don't need 3 years worth of Schedule Fs, because we can count a degree, or once again, working on a farm, or if you had a mentor, things like that, we can count towards that experience. So that might bring you down to 2 or even 1 year of Schedule Fs. But you will have to prove with a Schedule F that you have been farming at least for some time, because we don't want to come in and do a $600,000 loan to purchase a farm for someone who hasn't farmed before, and then they realize that 2 years down the road that it's not for them, and then we're stuck in that type of situation. So we try to push people to lease for a little bit first and make sure that this is something that they want to do. But like I said, it's not a full 3 years that is needed for a farm ownership.
Yeah. Matt, quickly, because one of the infrastructures we don't have in Rhode Island is many banks that are familiar with farm economics, but we have fewer accountants. So if somebody comes to you where they created an LLC or an S Corp and operated a farming business, those are acceptable.
Those are, yes, those count.
Okay. So Next question, please. Can you give me an example of a youth loan that has been funded in recent years?
I can give you 2 examples of that. We recently, just this year, did one for a young man. He is starting his own small nursery. He's going to be going around. He has already kind of linked up with some individuals to do their landscaping, but he also wanted to start a nursery business to supplement the landscaping business to sell products to homeowners. So he's going to grow the bushes and flowers and things, perennials, things like that. Through his high school, actually, they have small greenhouses. So he's going to grow in there, and then he's going to sell those products to homeowners. There is another young lady recently who has a cut flowers business. So she got a loan from us to plant a bunch of flowers, and then she is cutting them and making, bouquets, things like that, and selling them to people. So
she's doing a flower-supported agriculture, right? You can buy a bouquet a week.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. It's not like you have to just get a cow or whatever. There's a lot of opportunities there.
That's one where the youth loans, I think, is a remarkable growth opportunity for FSA and for younger people. It's capped at 5,000, but the little niche business, whether it's linked to our tourist season where you can deliver microgreens, fresh vegetables, some flowers, people will pay a premium at those farmers markets at the DEM campground, at Fisherman's Memorial and others. So there's some great opportunities. Next question. I've been trying to find land in Little Compton to start a seasonal cut flower and vegetable garden. Is there a partner or group I might reach out to for assistance? Ken, you know some of the land trust folks down there. Could you comment?
Sure. Almost every community in Rhode Island has a land trust. There are over 30. And Little Compton Ag Conservancy Trust is who I would go to in Little Compton. In fact, they just approached me about 3 weeks ago, asking us to help them advertise 5 farms that they have, that they own, that they were looking for a farmer to land. And this often happens with land trusts. They may own property or own the development rights to property where they're looking for farmers because they often buy farmland. So that RFP is currently out. Actually, I don't know the deadline that they have for responses. I know that we help distribute their application, and I can throw that into the email train that's going to go out or after this we close. But always go to your local land trust. And right now, I know that Little Compton Ag Conservancy Trust has 5 parcels that they're looking for farmers to lease. And also, we have a network in Rhode Island, part of our farmland access program, of a bunch of organizations, including DEM, Southside Community Land Trust, and others, where we try and match farmers to landowners who have land for either sell or to lease. And the point of contact for that is Michelle Sheehan at DEM in our Planning and Development Office, who helps farmers navigate that network that we put up.
Thank you, Ken. And I know I'd add in as well, any of those land trust organizations or others are going to say, what's the plan? What's the farm plan? And an integral part of your assessment for the 10 acres in West Kingston, I think 75% of the applicant valuation is clarity of the plan. I think we have time for one last question. So if we can tee one up. And the question is, my direct experience is limited, but I'm convinced food production is what I want to make my career. Do you have any suggestions where I can get some practical experience and receive some compensation? I take a little bit of that and say, talking to my colleagues at URI, Rebecca Brown, John Taylor, they are always looking for summer interns as well as a number of other organizations, Rhode Island. So again, try and plug into that local network. We have, people that Ken has already mentioned, Urban Edge Farm, Southside Community Land Trust, that have a capacity, as well as many farmers will give an interested student a chance.
I would say reach out to some of the CSAs in the area as well. A lot of CSAs hire on laborers directly. So from there you could learn, planting and harvesting of products and packaging and selling to people. A lot of CSAs are looking for help, for that matter. So, you can get paid to learn about agriculture while you do it. So,
and you go home with a good meal.
Exactly.
And so, colleagues Ken Ayers, Matt Richter, on behalf of myself, Michael Sullivan, for those of you who have participated in this through it, I think I speak for the three of us. We've enjoyed it. I think we have a passion for Rhode Island and Rhode Island agriculture. And thank you for your attention. And you have our emails, so if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. So I think now we're going back to the benevolent Catherine Flynn from the Foundation and the Business Center.
Thanks again, Mike, and also to Matt and Ken. That was really great, and I think the government really is here to help. We really appreciate all of you joining us. Thanks again also to Leah Cooper from behind the scenes from the Harrington School of Communications and Media for helping us with the technology for this event. The event has been recorded and will end up on the Food Center's website. We also hope you'll consider joining us for one of the Food Center's other upcoming events. We will be announcing more events soon, including an event with the URI Master Gardener Program in May. So please visit our website frequently, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a great day. Thanks.